Well, welcome back to another episode of the Weekday Saints podcast. Jonathan Ingram with my awesome co-host, LaQuisha Ewing.
Yeah.
And, we are so thankful to get to do the Weekday Saints podcast.
Yes.
Every week, we get to talk with people who live here in Chattanooga that are going to jobs all over the city, jobs that we've heard of, jobs we haven't heard of, doing things that oftentimes don't make the news. You wouldn't know about it. They're not running these big social media accounts.
That's right.
And they're being faithful where God has them to be. And we have another great example of that today for you to hear from of a guy in town, Rodney Cameron.
Yes.
And who has a heart for the Lord and is trying to serve him in his work and his family and in his ministry.
Yeah, he's a servant for sure. He talks a lot in this episode about the importance of servitude. So let's lean in and listen to Rodney Cameron.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Weekday Saints podcast. We are so pumped to have Rodney Cameron with us today to talk about your story, man.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, man, it is our honor to have you with us. Yes. Well, Rodney, before we jump into what you do for work and how you pay the bills, tell us a little bit about who Rodney Cameron is. Where are you from? Family? Tell us about your life.
So Rodney grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. But just a general, I always tell people when they first meet me, the first thing I want people to know is Rodney is a gentleman that cares. In whatever atmosphere he's in, he lives to serve. I always look for the need in the room. I'm not looking to be served. I'm looking to figure out how I can be a servant. First, more and importantly, right? Because I can remember times where I didn't have that. I didn't have anybody to show me. I didn't have anybody to lead through service. So I always try to be what I didn't have. And so so far that has gotten me into places that people typically wouldn't be in, whether it's being on the street meeting a need or being somewhere speaking. I'm still trying to meet that need. So just finding an environment and a place to fit in to meet a need.
Family?
So me and my lovely bride, her name is Nicole Cameron, have been married for 6 years as of March the 2nd. And I have a son, my namesake. His name is Bryce Carter Cameron. And so it's just amazing. I think a lot of people we just get in a hustle and bustle of doing life. But I told him today when I picked him up, I said, I'm so grateful to be your dad.
Yeah.
And it's just it's an honor to do life.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to talk about the, vocation job stuff in a minute, but you're already talking about it because being a dad, being a husband, those are callings on your life that require a lot. And, I, as a dad myself and a husband, there's a thankfulness that when we actually slow down and see what God's given us, it's just something, it's a humbling thing to think about.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. But I picked him up today. I think I've picked him up late for the last 2 days, fighting traffic. And I'm like, he gets in the car and I'm like, man, listen, I'm sorry. He's like, that is good. So he does this thing called aftercare. And, but just to see that young man's face when I pick him up, I've had the opportunity here lately to be able to do that. And it's just been absolutely amazing just to be able to thank God and be like, hey, God, thank you for even this time to be able to pick him up and see his face. Like the way he lights up is everything.
So what part of Chattanooga did you grow up in? Talk about your journey.
So I grew up downtown, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Some may know it as the West Side. Some may know it as the projects. I grew up in the housing projects downtown Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I'm the only child. But just grew up in a time where just making it out of that place. It's so odd that you asked this question, because making it out of that place wasn't that common. You got there and you got stuck. You got there and you were more dominated by the environment rather than getting out, rather than having an inspiration to get out. And I grew up in a time where hope had to be, it was really all you had. It was slim to none, and it was grim for a lot of young people. And as I look back, even at my life today, there were not that many young people that made it out like myself that are my age. A lot of them either died, a lot of them are either in the penitentiary, or a lot of them are just wayward. And so as I look back in that, I'm like, thank you. Like if you never do anything else for me, God, thank you for allowing me even today. Because I was a statistic. I wasn't supposed to make it. And so yeah, that's where I'm from.
So what was that thing? I like to hear those testimonies and those stories. But you're sitting there, little Rodney is sitting in the West Side, and there's a light bulb, there's a moment, there's a switch that happens that gives you the hope. We don't just get injected with hope.
Right.
Right. So what is the thing? Can you remember the moment, or remember the relationship that gets fostered, or the situation or program that you get introduced to that sparks this hope?
Absolutely. Gosh. So I was and the reason I said gosh is because I was just thinking about this. I was sitting in my office thinking about this the other day, but I can remember it like it was yesterday. Lights had gotten turned out. And it was me and my mom, my mom and my dad in the house. And I was in my room with a flashlight and a sheet and a broom pole, because I've always been this guy of imagination. Like I could do anything. If I had my imagination, I could take it anywhere. So I was in my room one day and I had a Dalmatian, 101 Dalmatian room. So the theme was just decked out with 101 Dalmatians. But I was in my room, and my mom always fostered this place of creativity. Even when we didn't have, it was still okay. We still made it. I never really knew that we didn't have, even when we didn't have, because it was always a place of being innovative, ingenuity, right? So that's where it started. I was in my room one day, and there was a sheet, there was a broom pole, and a flashlight. And I was just in this place. Like I can remember thinking, if I could just stay in this place of my imagination, of producing from that place, just you can make it through it. It's gonna be okay. Just even in the midst of the rough spots, I could always just look out the window or go play with my friends or do something in the environment where hurt was, and not let that dominate my whole mental space. Even as a child, I didn't know these words at the time, of course,
Right.
but I just knew that it was something there that kept me going. It was something there that didn't allow me to feel those feelings that most children felt.
And so your imagination led you to what work?
It led me to a place of seeing that very exact thing in children like myself. Like I can walk in a room and physically tell a child that's going through, and we don't even have to have a conversation, but because I've been in that place, I know what that child looks like. I know what that child lacks. I know more importantly how to cultivate that in a child, because I was once that child. I once had to use my imagination. And just even combing back through that in this phase of my life, it's like I see why I went through that.
Yeah. So as you made that journey, what do you do? What do you do for work now? What's your profession?
So my profession at this point is speaking. That's what I do. But it's as my job during the day, I work at Roper. But ministry is what I love. And what I'm learning about that is that it happens in many different facets.
Well, talk. What is when you work at Roper? What's your day to day look like? And then we'll get into the ministry stuff. But talk about what a day in the life of Rodney looks like when you go to work.
So a day in the life of Rodney looks like just letting it be through my life. Not necessarily because you can't talk, you don't do a lot of interacting, but just that glimmer of hope that somebody gets to see through your attitude, or you handing them something, or you being that light for somebody, or you serving somebody in a capacity that doesn't require you to speak, but just doing. It's amazing, because it makes you look at things in a different light, and it makes you consider being kind in a different way, other than just saying, hey, I serve Jesus all the time,
Right.
or God is good. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but I would rather express it much more because it means so much more coming from an act than your words.
You talk about the having to tap into your innovation. You have to show up. So you see, you don't get to speak. You have to show these things. So that means every day you have to figure out a way to be Jesus non-verbally,
Right.
because the work environment does not afford that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's I have a biblical studies undergrad degree. Thought maybe I'd be a pastor. I had a mentor say this to me once. He said, "Jonathan, only be a pastor if you can't do anything else." And he said that's a calling. And he said, honestly, it's a calling to equip the ministers to go out and do the work. And so you have a heart to preach the gospel. You're also now working a job where you go to a desk where you said you're not. It's almost harder because you're not just saying the gospel. You're having to live into it. And man, that ties right into your imagination piece of how do I take the truths of the gospel and imagine what that looks like, whether it's in a cubicle, in front of a computer, working on a document. How do I imagine the gospel showing up in these things? And I think that's the fact that you're someone who's driven by your imagination. What's it look like for you to lean into that? How does this gospel story drive you in what you do in your 9 to 5?
You have to almost see people change before they change. Like nobody's just going to change overnight. And you just have to have this grace. I think grace, and for me, imagination plays a major role in seeing the Jesus in people's lives. Because initially somebody could be mean as a rattlesnake. And although I love them, they may not feel the same way about me. They may have never encountered the love that I've encountered through my life. So at the same time, it's like, Lord, show me this person and who they're meant to be, not who they are right now, but show me who they're going to be, and help me to endure the process to be able to see your promise in their life to the end. Because the only God that they may see is my life. So if I ruin my testimony in this moment, then they may not ever see the God that you are. They may not even ever experience the love that you have to show them. So just being the innovation piece and the creativity piece plays a major part in being able to see that grace upon their life and in mine as well.
It's great. I mean, that's a way. I mean, it's a way you go into a job and doing it faithfully. You have a chance to show Jesus. Get a chance to serve your family by making a paycheck. Like this stuff is super honorable. I've been working on a definition for gospel imagination, and it's what you just described. It's how the world ought to be. If I was to see if Rodney was fully redeemed, what would it look like for Rodney to be fully redeemed, or what would it look like for this company to be fully redeemed if it was renewed to the way it's supposed to? And how do I try to live into that? And that's what I hear you saying is, how do I live and treat someone as who God sees them, not how I see them in that daily moment, whether it's a coworker or a customer. And I love how you just described that.
So what do you love about what you get to do? Because I want to talk a little bit about like tying, like, so Roper is your 9 to 5. It's the bread, right? That gets to go home to your family, but your heart. Because when I met you, I saw like, and even when we were alluded to it, you light up in a different way. Grateful for Roper. Heart is really tied to speaking life into people. So let's talk about, what do you love about what you get to do?
What I love about what I get to do is I realize the power in it. I realize that nothing is created without words. Nothing is created without expression. And so with that being said, I know that at this point of my life, even with me speaking, I have to be very careful about what I speak. Even if there's, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's a fit of rage, I have to be careful what I speak. If I'm operating out of a place of hurt, I still have to be careful what I speak. And if I'm being disrespected, I still have to be careful in what I speak. And if I agree with you and walk with you, I still have to be careful about what I speak.
James says a little bit about that, about the power of the tongue, doesn't it? I think there's some humility in saying that. Yeah. When you think about words, talked about how words have impacted you. It sounds like you can see the impact they have on others. Is there anyone that's spoken words over you that's really impacted you?
My dad. So that we actually have the same name. But I can remember growing up, and he would be at the foot of my bed every morning I got up, and he would be praying prayers like, I pray that my son knows relationship instead of religion.
Hmm.
I pray that what I do and what I say in front of him is edifying to you, but I pray that it leads him to a more prominent and real relationship with you, not just what can be acted out, but an actual relationship in you. So I just always saw a man a man of few words exemplify his life and give up his life. And so
Hmm.
it means a lot to me to be able to understand the power of words, because I saw it exemplified in my life and before me.
I love that, like you said, Roper is where the bread comes from, but it allows you to do the things that you're passionate about. What does it look like for you? Where do words show up in things outside of your 9 to 5 that you get to do? What are some of the outlets that you have for being able to speak and do ministry over people through your words?
So here lately, young men's ministry, or men's ministry in general, has always been a passion of mine, because I realize that in society, they don't get the pouring into that they need oftentimes. And I also realize the foundation of how the family is began. And so I use my time, a lot of time, to be able to send messages. Every morning I sit on my cell phone. I pray about these messages. I pray for different friends and different groups of men in my life. And God just gives me things for them. And I just sporadically will shoot them out and just see how they're doing and just pour into them. Even if it's nothing major, just letting them know that I love them. But here lately, I've just been really sending out a post. I spend at least 45 minutes to an hour every day for the last 2 weeks doing this, and just sending them out, and just to be able to hear the testimonies in these men's lives. Like, man, you don't know what I was going through, and I was about ready to give up, but you sent this message, and it changed the trajectory of my whole entire day, and it changed it changed my life. Because I had one young man say, I was about to do something foolish until you sent me this message. And so just to be able to see how words has the ability to shift the mindset and shift the trajectory of somebody's day and their life, it's really amazing.
It's very interesting. So that's a pretty relatable story. I'm probably a part of 50 groups that are similar on the receiving end of that. But a lot of times, when I'm reading the message, the question that I have is, what's motivating that lady or that woman that's sending that message? Like, what's motivating her to pour into all of these women or young ladies on a daily basis or weekly basis, however the message is coming? So for you, I want to know, like what do you wish people knew about why you do what you do?
What I wish people knew most is about the power of sonship.
Elaborate on that, yeah.
I wish people understood that they weren't just where they are because they're where they are. I wish they understood that their placement in society, in life, was very strategic. I wish they understood that because you're here, you have an assignment on your life, there's an inheritance for you. There's a DNA and an identity that you're meant to serve, somebody that you're meant to become, and all of that came from a source. And because you live in a domain, somebody's accountable for you because they own this domain. They own this place, this space that you live in. It's like me living in the house with my parents. There is nothing that my parents would let me go without because I lived in their home. They were responsible for me. And I feel like so many times, because we feel like we're so alone, that we pull to ourselves, and we're so solo in a lot of things that we do, for the lack of better words. And we don't think that anybody cares. But if you just understood that you were a son and the power of sonship, and that you had a heavenly father that cared for you so much more, that you had somebody who maybe wouldn't take you out of the issue, but he maybe would get in the midst of the issue with you, and it would make it a whole lot better. I think for me, I like the way that David said. He said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? Because thy rod and thy staff comforts me. He's talking about that's more so father terminology.
Yeah.
You may not take me out of the valley that I'm in, but I know that you will get in this thing with me and you will be here with me. How do I know that? Because you've done it before with me.
That's
And I have no doubt that you will do it again.
That's right.
And if we could just take that lens and give it to young men and perhaps even older men that had no idea, that didn't even have a father in their life.
Yeah.
A lot of us shun fatherhood. And that's what I've gotten in the last 2 weeks. A lot of us shun it and we don't understand it because it hurt too much to think about it.
Yeah.
Physically, it hurts. A lot of people didn't have the privilege of having a father.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't have the privilege of seeing the reflection of a good father.
Yeah.
It says a good father leaves his children an inheritance. Not just talking about the physical aspect of things, but talking about the non-tangible things, the things that I can't buy with money, the things that I can't invest in with capital, the things that can only be transferred through relationship.
That's right. Man, that just tied a lot of your story together for me. You started by talking about where you grew up, and you talked about the narrative of growing up there, right? And that wasn't your narrative. Then you talked about what your hope was in imagining something better, right?
Yes.
But the reason you could imagine something better was what you talked about with your dad. That he spoke a narrative over you that wasn't the narrative of the neighborhood, right? He spoke a narrative of you of who you were as his son, but also ultimately someone else's son of God, right? And what you just walked us through was the narrative of what it means to have God as our father,
Right.
right? And you're right. It's not something that we get that's tangible. It's like, it's a title that we can't, of son, that we can only get from a father, right?
Absolutely.
And that, like, the things that we crave. And when I think about tying your story together, I'm just thinking about like hope and imagination. Hope and imagination become real when we know the story. You know, the imagination happens when we know the story, and then hope happens when we know the end of the story.
Come on.
Right? And the thing that you're seeing and these guys you're pouring into, and what you talked about is, you talked about when you see someone how they ought to be, is you know how they ought to be because you know the end of the story, right? Ah, man, I'm just fired up about that. That's so cool. Thank you for walking us through that. That's a really good why. And we want to know what your why is. That, I mean, if you're listening to this, that is a why to live into. That if as a believer we know that God has us, that He's working things out for our good. That He's not going to leave us, and He sees us as His son and His daughter.
And He wrote the script.
He wrote the script.
That's the thing. When you're tapped in to the writer of the script,
Yeah.
I don't care what character comes in,
Come on.
because I'm tapped into who wrote the script.
Yeah.
I know what's coming. What's coming next is whatever God has ordained.
That's it.
And you are whoever He said you were.
Come on.
And if I can tap into Him, right? If I can tap into Him, I'm going to see you in whatever light He wrote you in. I tell people that, like, we tend to over or under think about this word character, right? So we call TV actors characters. We call all their roles. So the character of God shows up in us as characters in life.
Come on.
But the Bible is the script. We all are acting in character if we're, as believers, if we're in line. And the character is not something that we don't know. It's a character that we're supposed to be modeling.
Yeah.
So I see Christ's character in you. I see Christ's character in you. That's what I heard. Your father, to Jonathan's point, spoke what he knew because he knew the author and the finisher of your story before you even began to act her.
Yes. You mentioned Psalm 23 as just something that's really impactful in your journey. Is there other aspects of who God is, or a passage in Scripture that drives you in your daily work, in your work as your vocation as a dad and a father and a husband, your work, your 9 to 5, or in the things that you feel called to in your ministry? Is there verses or things that drive you in that you think about regularly?
It is. There's a staple that I always come back to, and it's Genesis 1:26. You were created in my image, after my likeness, to have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air. And so, yes, that's one that I live by, because oftentimes we come into these environments and we come into these places and we judge them based upon where we are in life, not the overall spectrum of where we are and who we are. I think so many times, even often, we base our identity of where we are in the temporary moment, not who He's called us to be. Yeah. So the standard of our identity has been already off kilter from the beginning because we based it off of a temporary moment. And so I've just learned that in whatever I go through, like, you're still God.
Yeah.
So either, let me tell you something very, very, very funny that's been very like instrumental in my life. He's shown me lately the reason why I have you to go to these places is based on assignment, not even money. Grant, we need money to live,
Yeah.
but why I have you to go to these places is because there's something that I'm trying to get to you to either elevate you or to bring you into the next season of your life.
Right.
And so I don't even base things off of income anymore. I base them off of the outcome of what you've placed in me.
That's right.
And so it's just,
Yeah.
so Roper is not a place that I'm going to make an income. It's something there that you want me to see. It's somebody there that you want me to impact.
Yes.
It's somebody there that you want me to serve.
That's right.
So just show me what you need me to do, and I can stop focusing on the monetary aspect
That's
of it,
right.
the temporal aspect of it.
That's right.
Because 9 times out of 10, that's not why I'm there.
That's right.
And that's it.
Yeah, I think we either think it's by accident or this is something I survived to get back to the God things, right? I have a friend that talks about how do we build in practices in our life to see that God meets us in those places of work, and stuff like sitting at a cubicle, taking their shoes off and saying this is holy ground, or praying over the chairs of the coworkers and asking the Lord to bless them, that we can invite the Lord in, that he goes with us in those places, whether it's the job that feels really mundane or the job that lights me up.
That's
How do I serve where I'm at, right? And so I love that. That's so good.
Yes. Yes. It's absolutely amazing because ever since I've learned that, I've absolutely fallen in love with serving. And this is what it's done for me. It brings me into places that I typically wouldn't find opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, when growing up, I can remember the first place that I ever did ministry was actually street ministry. And the opportunity in that for me was finding an individual to love that didn't know love the way I knew it. My dad on Friday night, we would spend our nights packing lunches for homeless individuals on the street. But in actuality, we spent our time praying over these individuals that needed to understand that they were sons and daughters. So in actuality, we found out that these individuals were sons and daughters. They just didn't know it yet.
Yeah.
So they needed a son or a daughter that knew that they were sons and daughters to come in contact with another son and daughter for them to understand who they actually were.
That's right.
So everything is an opportunity to serve. It's not an opportunity to be up on a platform, or it's not an opportunity to make sure that I can be heard. It's not an opportunity to make sure that I'm an opportunist in any of these spaces. It's an opportunity more so to say, how can I serve you today? What can I do for you? Because I understand that when I come in as a servant, who's coming through me. So I'm just a vessel. That's it. That was this morning. That was the message that I sent out to the guys. Vessel of value. You're a vessel of value everywhere you go. You present life. So you have the opportunity to present life or death. Which one are you going to do?
That's good.
What representative are you going to be today? You decide.
You know, your life, it sounds like it's one where you're constantly pouring out, but you've also made it really clear who pours into you, and it's the Word of God. It's the saints around you. It's the people that went before you.
Absolutely.
And we are recipients of you pouring out God's goodness and grace and speaking truth over us. So thanks for making time to be with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Rodney Cameron.
Yes.
I mean, he talked about the impact words has on his life, and he thinks on other people's lives, and he dropped some words on us that touched me.
Yeah, listen, when he opened up and talked about Genesis 1:26, and that's what fuels him, understanding the dominion that he has, and not taking that lightly. All of those things like speak to the picture that gets painted and the script that we all are given for the life we're supposed to live.
The way he talked about other people and the way he would see them, it speaks to how God sees us. Like, you know, the Bible talks a lot about how we were made in his image. And talks about when Jesus came. We now, when God sees us, he sees Jesus.
Yes.
And what it felt like with Rodney was when he sees others, he sees them what it means for God to have renewed them already.
Yeah.
And he treats them that way, in the way he goes about doing his life, and the way he serves others, and the way he speaks things over people. And that means he knows the story. And we talked a lot about stories, we talked a lot about narratives, and a story leads you to a deeper imagination, right?
Yeah.
And his hope in that was he knows the end of the story. And it just made me go, Jonathan, how often do I get stuck in the moment?
Right.
And I miss having hope because I'm not thinking about that this end of the story has already been spoken over me.
Right. It's been spoken over you and what you have.
Yeah.
I love the fact that he talked about his childhood story of, kind of having their lights turned out, and he had a broomstick and a sheet and a flashlight.
Yeah.
And he imagined being somewhere else. He imagined the possibilities and that just opened up the door for him.
There's a pastor, Tim Keller, and he tells the story that that type of hope leads you to a place where you see something bigger and more beautiful than you could have imagined. He said, oftentimes we're like the kid who gets stuck playing with the mud puddle, but over the hill is the ocean.
Yeah.
And Rodney has a vision for how he lives life, of what it might look like for God to show up, whether it's in his 9 to 5, in the way he sees others, and the way what he wants for his family. And man, that's something we could all live into. It doesn't matter what you're doing for work. We're called to see that and have hope that God's gone before us, and that he's got something for us in that space.
And that story, that beautiful story of redemption, has already been written, and we won at the end.
Man, well, I hope you are encouraged as you heard Rodney's story and your own story. Thanks for tuning in to the Weekday Saints podcast. It means a lot to us. We hope it's been a gift to you as it has to us. And come back for another episode.